Black people have had to navigate racism nonstop in this country for centuries. We're constantly dehumanized, given less opportunities and pay compared to other ethnicities, and either thrown into prisons or killed. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But this amount of racism just doesn't come from white people. As of the 2024 presidential election, many minorities really show their true colors. We all know that the Latino community has a lot of racist people, but not many people talk about the Asian community. In fact, the Asian community seems to be more racist. In fact, the Asian community seems to be more racist than white people nowadays. But before I get into this video, I just want to stop and introduce myself. Hello, I'm Tam the Apper, and welcome to my commentary channel where I talk about many things that come to my mind. So go ahead and get yourself nice and comfy, have some water nearby, because I have so much to talk about. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and lay down some rules and give a disclaimer. I want no racism in the comments. Absolutely none. I don't want to see people going slur for slur, because what's that gonna do? Y'all calling each other slurs in the comments is not going to do anything. Like, systems in play will still exist, whether you call each other racial slurs in the comments or not. Like, it's not to be a bigger person. It's just we need to get better at organizing, first and foremost. So yeah, no racism towards Black people, Asian people, Latino people. None of that. And as for the disclaimer, this video will be talking about racism and the murder of children. So if that's going to trigger you in any way, shape, and form, please click off this video. I'm sure I'll be putting a more lighthearted video somewhere in this video, probably that little eye up there. But please take care of yourself, okay? Now, I know I'm a little late to the conversation, but this case that I'm mostly referring to is the murder case of 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack-Belton, a Black teenage boy who just wanted some water. Cyrus Carmack-Belton was born on February 6th of 2009. He aspired to be a tattoo artist, and he was described by his family as intelligent and humorous. In fact, his mother said his hugs, out of boys, he gave the best, tight, warm hugs. His parents described him as a jokester who was always full of life, bright, fun, and creative. Now, this takes place in Richland County in Columbia, South Carolina, and that is a predominantly Black community. And the perpetrator of this crime is 61-year-old Chike Rick Chow. CCTV footage shows Carmack-Belton browsing the drink section and getting water, thinking about buying it, but ultimately putting it back. Not putting it in his hoodie pocket or backpack, just putting it back where it belonged. Now, it's claimed that Cyrus, I'm going to interchange between his first name and his last name. It's believed that Cyrus pointed his boomstick at Chow's son in the store. Now, he did have a boomstick, and people were saying like that was validation for what happened to him and why a child had a boomstick, but this is the American South. If we're being completely honest, this is the American South. It is so easy for a kid to get access to a firearm when they shouldn't. And people wonder why there's so many mass shootings almost every damn day and the perpetrators are white. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. After putting the water away, a verbal altercation seemingly began between Chow and Cyrus about the waters. Then Cyrus made his way out of the store, just thinking of it, just thinking he will take his business elsewhere. But then Chow began to chase him and accuse Cyrus of stealing. Seeing that Chow was actively pointing his firearm at him, Cyrus ran for his life. Any regular person would, I would assume. If someone was chasing you and pointing a weapon of any sort at you, 9 times out of 10, your first instinct is to run. That's the fight or flight response right at work right there. Your first instinct is to run, and that's what this boy did. Before and during the court hearing, multiple eyewitnesses came forward and said Cyrus didn't have anything in his hands. He was so focused on running. He didn't pull anything out of his pockets. He didn't pull anything out of his bag. He just ran. He ran so hard, his boomstick fell out on the floor. He ran so hard, his shoes came off. He was dropping so many things out of his pockets while running, and none of them were those damn bottles of water. He was just running for his life, desperately escaping Chow. And Chow proceeded to chase him over 130 yards over a perceived bottle of water, which it is not that serious. If someone steals, it is not that serious. Especially if you work for a big corporation like Walmart or something. If someone steals from that company can easily get that money back. Like if you were to steal like a sparkling ice, those things are just $1. That company will obviously make it back 10 times over. I'm not saying steal. Legal reasons. I am not saying to steal from any corporations for legality reasons. I am not saying go steal stuff. No. But honestly, 4 bottles of water is not worth a child's life. And I can only imagine the fear, stress, anxiety going through Cyrus's head, going through this kid's head while running for his life before his life was so brutally taken. Because after a while, Chow got in enough range to discharge his firearm, hitting Cyrus in the back, killing him. And all this could have been prevented long before Cyrus stepped foot in that convenience store, because Chow is a little trigger happy. Between a span of 2018 and 2023, Chow has been calling in regards to assaults, larceny, shoplifting, motor vehicle theft, vandalism, robbery, burglary, this, that, and the third. To the point where Chow even discharged his firearm on an alleged shoplifter and at the vehicle of another alleged shoplifter, but claimed they were self-defense. You don't just shoot your boomstick willy-nilly at people and think it was self-defense. Chud the Builder is a prime example of that, and he's facing the ramifications of his actions, hopefully. But this case just brings back so many harmful memories to another case of an Asian person killing a black child. And that case that I'm referring to would be the murder of Latasha Harlins, a 15-year-old girl who just wanted some orange juice. Born on July 14th, 1975 in St. Louis, Illinois, Latasha Harlins was just an average girl, just getting through life, especially with her mother being killed outside of a Los Angeles nightclub. And with that, she moved with her grandmother so she could take care of her. Harlan moved into South Central Los Angeles with her grandma, and she lived her life as a usual teen in the Los Angeles area until one fateful day on March 16th of 1991, she walked into the Empire liquor store to purchase a $1.79 orange juice. Now, the Empire Liquor Store was a Korean-owned convenience store, and the owner, 49-year-old Soon Ja-do, had a long history of racism. In fact, many people stated that she treated the black customers horribly, and a lot of them would avoid the Empire Liquor Store as much as possible. In fact, Harlan's grandmother said, "Don't go in there unless you have the intent of buying something." And on March 16th, Harlan's did. In fact, she went in, got her little orange juice, and put it in her backpack to have her hands free so she could pay. She didn't intend to steal it. She wanted to go ahead and pay, but not fumble with the juice and the money in her hands. An eyewitness, Ishmael Ali, said that once Harlan's got to the counter, Do saw the orange juice sticking out of her bag and said, quote, "You bitch, you are trying to steal my orange juice." Latasha then showed in her hands that she had 2 $1 bills that she intended to pay, but Stu wasn't trying to hear any of that. In fact, she grabbed this 15-year-old girl, by her sweater and started physically assaulting her. Now, Latasha managed to break free, and after she broke free from Du violently assaulting her, she put the orange juice on the counter and proceeded to walk out the store. Unfortunately, Du grabbed her firearm, aimed for the back of Latasha's head, and fired. Latasha's body dropped to the ground and she died instantly. And this all happened 2 weeks before the beating of Rodney King by those 4 LAPD officers, 3 of which were white. So people thought this was just a precursor to more and more violence against the black community. Now, Du was tried for this, rightfully so, but she wasn't given the rightful conviction, so to speak. Du was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not murder, manslaughter, and initially sentenced to 16 years in prison. Now, this was changed to 400 hours of community service, probation, and a $500 fine. And before you guys ask, yes, the judge was white, particularly a white woman. For those asking how these people are getting off so just getting off so easily, it's all based on the pattern of the model minority myth. So with this model minority myth, it basically says, in the eyes of white supremacy, Asian Americans are seen as higher than black people, but are still not immune to racism. Asian Americans experience, and quote, relative valorization by having close proximity to whiteness. But a lot of y'all forget that during the 2020 panoramic, the attacks on Asian people, the perpetrators were white. And it goes further than just the panoramic. Now, before the Great Replacement Theory, there was the Yellow Peril. And the Yellow Peril was basically white people thinking Asian people would dominate and eventually outnumber white people. And this goes all the way back to the 1800s, where a lot of Chinese immigrants were coming to the U.S. in search of asylum from economic, political, and military strife. And during this time, Chinese immigrants were heavily exploited by white people, and this exploitation became more prevalent post-Civil War because they couldn't really use black people anymore. So since they couldn't really use black people anymore, they went to go and exploit Chinese immigrants. And they said that using them for labor was, quote unquote, the closest thing to slavery. And during this, they came up with so many derogatory names towards the Chinese immigrants and many stereotypes regarding them. They called them dishonest, irresponsible, and thieving, but they also called them intelligent and hardworking. Now, this was most likely because they didn't really have the ability to stand for themselves and not be exploited, because there was no way for them to be assimilated to be U.S. citizens at that time. In the eyes of white people back in those days, Chinese immigrants were seen as less demanding and more docile due to their immigration status. And this was the beginning of the end in regards to the model minority myth. And let's not forget the quote-unquote date which will live in infamy. On December 7th, 1941, Japan launched an attack on Pearl Harbor, killing 2,403 military officials and civilians, and injuring 1,178 military officials and civilians. And if we're being completely honest here, because a whole lot of white people died, the government decided to do something about it. So then President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which called for the mass incarceration of Japanese Americans. Just go after the people that did the wrong, that did the bombings, which was Japanese military officers of the Japanese army, not Japanese Americans, who most likely had zero ties to the Japanese military whatsoever. But because of racism and prejudice and paranoia, that's how we got Executive Order 9066. That's how we got Japanese internment camps, which they were called relocation centers, but we all know what they were. They were camps. They were diet concentration camps, if we're being completely honest. But despite every negative thing that happened to Asian Americans that were perpetrated by white people, they still will not let go of that model minority mindset. And it's mostly thanks to a lot of white led media. In fact, one New York Times article in particular in 1966 stated, if Japanese Americans can overcome racial prejudice based on ascribed cultural values of compliance, frugalness, perseverance, educational attainment, and work ethic, then why should Black Americans not be able to do the same? Well, gee, New York Times, I don't know. Maybe it's because every time we try and do something good for ourselves, white people try and blow us up. I wish I was joking. But not only are Asian Americans placed on a pedestal for all minorities to strive for, Asian Americans and Asians in general are often highly fetishized, mostly by white people, especially the ivory skin Asians, which leads to the very, very touchy subject of skin bleaching, which is basically a $19.8 billion business at this point. And it's mostly Southeast Asians that get the brunt of it because anti-Blackness has just spread so prevalently in Asian culture now. As a matter of fact, a quote from the NU Political Review says, the belief that pale skin is a symbol of beauty and indication of socioeconomic status is deeply ingrained in the psyche of many Asians and Asian Americans. So with all this model minority craziness, being close to whiteness in mindset and physical appearance has really done a number on the Asian community as a whole. And the Natasha doll trend, and I'm using that term lightly, is just an example of how anti-Blackness is somewhat incentivized and praised by white capitalism because those things, those Natasha dolls, are now on eBay.
So in East Asia, people have been buying a doll resembling a black baby that's marketed as cute and ugly to relieve stress. But the stress relief looks a lot like anti-Blackness. Some people are saying it's just a doll, and technically it is. But when you also have people saying the black doll is more fun to abuse because it's ugly and looks less human, you start to notice some trends. Like how they say dark-skinned characters in a global game won't sell, but dark-skinned punching bags fly off of shelves. Or how people can look at black culture long enough to learn rap and choreography, but not long enough to learn why something might be taboo historically. Globally, there's a trend of black kids, men, and women being denied their humanity. And I'm not here to tell you that someone abusing a doll is gonna make the world end, but I do want you to pay attention. No matter how much people try to tell you that stuff like this doesn't mean anything, know that every large form of discrimination was built on smaller things. And you're not crazy for noticing.
For those saying the Natasha dolls aren't that deep, I want you to take a closer look at this. This is what happens when anti-Blackness is normalized in our communities. When you're teaching children that it's acceptable to slap, throw around, mock, or dehumanize dolls that are meant to represent black children, you're desensitizing them to the dehumanization, brutalization, and mistreatment of black children and black people as a whole. You're reinforcing the idea that black people are objects rather than human beings deserving of dignity, humanity, and respect. Watching those babies and children cry was truly heartbreaking because we're no longer talking about dolls. We're talking about real children being humiliated, exploited, and dehumanized. And unfortunately, this isn't new. The exploitation of African children has been happening for years. In 2022, BBC Africa Eye exposed a Chinese man named Luke, who was living in Malawi and filming children for personalized videos that were later sold online. Some reportedly sold up to $70 on Chinese social media platforms. What breaks my heart even more is seeing children being used to repeat colorist and degrading messages about themselves. Whether it's reinforcing the idea that lighter skin is beautiful, undermining their intelligence, or having children call themselves monsters. These messages can have a lasting impact on how children view themselves and their worth. It's hurtful, it's concerning, it's disrespectful, and above all, it's dehumanizing. Anti-Blackness within Asian communities doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It shows up through stereotypes, colorism, harmful beauty standards, and the way Black people are talked and portrayed. We've seen it in exploitation of African children. We've seen it in reports of Africans being denied entry into businesses. We've seen it in incidents where Black people were compared to animals, including a museum exhibit in China displayed photos of Black people next to monkeys. Comparison rooted in some of the oldest and most dehumanizing racist stereotypes. And every time these conversations come up, people would rather get defensive than address the harm itself. As an Asian woman, that's what hurts the most. Because holding our community accountable shouldn't be controversial. It should be the bare minimum. Not because I hate my community, but because I love my community enough to believe we can do better.
But thankfully, not all Asian Americans have this toddler's grip on the model minority myth. As a matter of fact, Elena Caron, the author of the Northeastern University Political Review article I'm reading, titled Anti-Blackness in Asian and Asian American Communities, stated that in her research, she found a picture of an Asian man during a Black Panther Party rally in Oakland, California in 1969, and the sign said, "Yellow Peril supports Black Power." And during 2020, when police brutality was forced to the forefront thanks to social media, a lot of Asian Americans were running the hashtag Asians for Black Lives in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And even some Asian Americans are calling out other Asian Americans for being mad at Black people for boycotting Asian Americans after the ruling of Rick Chow.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm serious about this shit. I'm not spending another damn dime.
When they killed George Floyd, did you stop going to white businesses?
This situation pissed me the fuck off. Because you and your crooked ass teeth had the audacity to bring up George Floyd in a situation where it wasn't even warranted. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When I say anti-Blackness and ignorance show themselves, the moment accountability enters the conversation, I'm appalled, disgusted, and furious she would ever make a comment like that and think it was okay to post. A child lost his life due to racial profiling and injustice, and you have the fucking nerve to be more upset about Black people boycotting Asian businesses than the actual death of a child. Quite frankly, Black people have every right to boycott Asian businesses if they choose to. We have not done enough to fight anti-Blackness within our own communities. We have not done enough to prove ourselves as true allies. We have not done enough to make our spaces safe for Black people. Instead of supporting their causes and amplifying their voices, you choose to deflect and ask why don't they boycott white businesses. And then you have the nerve to weaponize George Floyd's death against them. I'm not surprised because way too many of y'all are more offended being held accountable than by actual racism. Too many of y'all are invested into proximity to whiteness that you'd rather defend anti-Black rhetoric than confront the damage it causes. The Asian community has spent decades benefiting from Black economic power, Black activism, and Black-led civil rights movements while refusing to hold honest conversations about anti-Blackness. The fact that we have 35 years between Latasha Harlins and Cyrus Carmack-Belton and we're still having the same conversations is a fucking embarrassment. After all these years, after everything that happened during COVID and police brutality against Black people, after all the conversations about solidarity, we're still here. I am ashamed of every single one of you who continue pushing this bullshit, because when you reinforce anti-Black rhetoric, you're also referencing anti-Asian rhetoric whether you realize it or not, spitting on the legacy of people like Yuri Kochiyama, Grizzly Bugs, and countless others. You're dismissing the very people who understood that our liberation is tied together. If it weren't for the Black community helping pave the way for civil rights in this very white supremacist country, many of us would not have protections, opportunities, and voices we have today. And the real gag is, you're not even Asian American. You're Asian from the mainland. So who the fuck are you to speak for Asian Americans or act like you have authority over conversations involving our communities and our history, instead of inserting yourself into conversations you clearly don't understand? Maybe worry about the anti-Blackness that exists in the mainland. And I want all of y'all to stop infantilizing Asian people. Stop pretending Asians have never seen black people before. That excuse is tired. We've all seen black people. We've seen black tourists. We've seen black international teachers. We've taken black people's money. We've consumed black culture while not advocating for their rights. Enough with the fake naivety. So sit the fuck down, learn something, and for once, shut your fucking mouth and listen. You're a disgrace to the Asian community and a disgrace to your ancestors.
In conclusion, anti-blackness has spread vastly across all minority groups and successfully ingrained itself in many people of color and even some black people's minds. The only way we can cure this virus of anti-blackness is to unlearn the hateful and harmful rhetoric. Once we dismantle that and dismantle that grasp of white supremacy, not just as black people, but all minorities, especially the Asian community, then we can actually get stuff done. Also, rest in paradise to Cyrus Carmack-Belton and Latasha Harlins. Y'all deserve to grow old. But that's all I have for right now. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like, comment, and share to educate others. And if you really like this video and want to see more of it, then subscribe. Anyways, be sure to wash your hands, stay hydrated, mask up, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you guys next time I have a think piece. Take care now.